You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
And today on our Training Thursday show, I've got a good one for you today. Everybody loves training their abs. Everybody wants a flatter stomach and a tighter tummy. But one of the things that we have to watch out for are the actual exercise that we select. Too much of the time, we're choosing exercises that maybe were great or we thought that were great 30 years ago, or we see other people doing in the gym, or maybe they're in a magazine. But are they actually good for you? And even if they're good for your abs, are they good for your spine? Are they good for the long run? Remember, on this show, we're always talking about longevity. I want you to be able to exercise for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And if you're not able to do that with the exercise that you're currently doing, they're not a good choice today. Remember, we're looking at longevity and being able to stay in this game for a long time. So without further ado, let's get right into the first ab exercise that I recommend you never do. So these are not the good ones, and I'm always going to tell you why. I'll never make it hypey. The show's not about, trying to prove someone else wrong or myself right. None of these things. I didn't make up these exercises. I didn't make up the ones I may recommend to you. It's just my take after being in this great industry, the fitness and health industry, for 20 years. And also, of course, looking at the research, looking at the actual physiology of the human spine. Because when we're talking about that, we're talking about our abs. Our abs basically cover the bottom part of our mid-back, our thoracic spine, all the way down to our lower spine, which is called the lumbar part of the spine. And below that, there are other vertebrae as well. But when we talk about getting injured, we're really talking about, for the most part, the L4, L5. We're talking about maybe some of the thoracic vertebrae. Those begin with a T. The cervical vertebrae are more in the neck. Those begin with a C. And why? Because what happens is a lot of time when we're doing ab work, we're really rounding out the back and we're pulling with our head and neck. That's never meant to be the case. So let's get into it right now. Full sit-ups. Full sit-ups, my first one, never to. Now, have I used them with people? Yes. And I've also actually trained many athletes and also FBI agents, and they have to pass a certain test. And in that test, they actually have to do an insane amount of full sit-ups inside of a minute. Now, what is a full sit-up? Typically, you're putting your hands to the side of your head or right behind your head, and you have your legs bent, you're lying on the floor, and you're pulling your chest all the way up to your knees. So you're doing a full sit-up, not a crunch, which is just maybe moving up 8 inches or so, engaging your abs. This is a full sit-up. You're typically rounding out your spine and you're pulling your chest all the way up. Well, one thing to look at is they've done a lot of studies on this, especially in pigs. Essentially, that's how they look at it, and they say that's one of the worst things that you can do for your spine, and it actually shows the injury rate goes up when you start rounding out that spine. Now, the difference between that and the studies is that the pigs are not engaging their abdominal muscles as they're bringing their body up, right? So there's no engagement of the core. They're literally just flexing the spine is what it's called. Extending is when you lift your chest up and back, like when you're doing a back extension, and flexing is when you bring your chest towards your knees. So because of your spine health, because of the discs in between the spine, which I'm going to be talking a lot about today, that full sit-up is not a good idea. A regular flat crunch where you're basically almost isometric, just flexing your abs, would be a better alternative to that. Still not the best, but a better alternative to those full sit-ups. All right, the rocker ab machine. Now, you may have seen it. It's where you're lying all the way down on your back. You're putting your head on a machine, and what you're doing is you put your elbows on a pad and you hold onto a bar, and you just basically crunch up. Now, it is a crunch. It's not a full sit-up, and you are flexing your abs. However, you are muscling your body up with your arms and your arm muscles, and you're pulling with your shoulders as well. So what's the issue with that? The issue is that you're trying to overpower your core muscles and use more of your arms and upper body. That's why I don't love machines in general for your abs, because when you're working your abdominal muscles, we're not just talking about the abs that you can see in the outside. Those are called your rectus abdominis. What I mainly talk about is your transverse abdominis. Those are the muscles you can't see. Those are below the six-pack or the eight-pack that you can see on the outside. That eight-pack is a very, very thin layer. And everybody has it. It's just usually covered by body fat on most people. But below that are much more dense, intertwined muscles that keep the spine safe. And so what happens is when you're using machines, sometimes you're over-muscling that, not with those ab and core muscles, but actually with your arms, and you're, again, loading up more of your spine. Stay away from machines whenever you're doing ab work. That doesn't include cables. It just includes fixed machines, right? In general, fixed machines are not a good idea. So the third one is bicycle crunches. Why would bicycle crunches not be good exercise? So bicycle crunches can be a pretty good exercise. What's the issue, though? The issue is this. When most people do bicycle crunches, they have their hands to their temples. Again, they're lying on their back. You can just type the name of this exercise into Google and you'll find out what a bicycle crunch is if you don't already know. So one of the issues with the bicycle crunch is that usually you are pulling your opposite elbow lying on your back to your opposite knee as you're pulling that knee in. So basically, one leg is out straight, one leg's bent at a right angle, and you pull that opposite knee over to that elbow. But what happens with this exercise is most people just rock side to side. And a lot of the personal trainers listening to this will absolutely agree and understand what I'm talking about. There's this rocky motion, side to side, left to right, instead of forward and back. Now, the forward and back allows you to engage your abs. Side to side, you end up doing like 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 reps, and you're not even working your abs. You're just literally rocking side to side. I see this done way too many times the wrong way, and that's why I recommend not doing it until you either learn the right way to do it or you just strengthen your abs in a different way, because I don't want to see people rocking side to side rather than actually engage in those abdominal muscles and your obliques, which we'll talk about in a moment. Another one, the number 4, is the partner leg push down. So basically, you're doing a leg lift, which means you're lying down, again, flat on your back. So far, I think we've been flat on our back with all these exercises, except for the last one coming up. Your hands are underneath your glutes for the most part, or you're holding on behind you, and then what's happening is your legs go up in the air because you do both straight legs up, and then that's a leg lift, and then a partner pushes your legs back down to the floor. So this is a far more advanced exercise where it's called eccentric loading, and that just means on the way down when you're working with gravity, the negative part of a repetition, you're loading that up with weight, but your body's not ready for it because concentrically, when you're lifting your legs up, that's called the positive phase, it wasn't using that same load. So your body wasn't used to it. So neurologically, it's not expecting now your body to get this big load on the way down where you just kind of drive it down. Someone else is just throwing your legs down to the ground. They're pushing them down. And the issue with this is you could get abdominal tearing. So your abdominal muscles create more than just little micro tears, which you get during a workout. They create actual real tearing. And your lower back is far more likely to arch as you try to compensate with your lower back rather than just those abdominal muscles or core muscles in general. So I can't recommend that. I see no need for it. If you want to get a little bit more advanced, you could hold a small dumbbell between your feet as long as you're keeping your neutral spine, as long as you're keeping tension on the whole time. And then your body's used to taking that 5-pound dumbbell up and 5-pound dumbbell down. You can do that. Again, not necessary. So many other great exercises like chops and a plank and different things like that. But if you love that exercise, that's a better, safer version. So remember, my job is just to teach you a safer version of it or tell you just not to do it in general. And the last one today, the very last one, now this one goes back since like the beginning of exercising with weights, and that's holding a dumbbell in one arm, and you're standing up and you're bending towards the side with the dumbbell or bending away from it depending on how you typically do the exercise. Most people typically bend all the way to the right side and then all the way to the left side with a dumbbell, and it works your obliques, which is the muscles right above your hip bones, right below what people call their muffin top or right below what people call the love handles, right? So those obliques right there. Now, they're great muscles to work, but the issue is they're great stabilizer muscles. They work to stabilize anti-rotation, not to let the body twist, and they also work with rotation. The problem is we're using them what's called unilaterally, so we're going side to side, and the issue is that it puts a lot of, it's called intervertebral pressure. So inside the vertebrae, which means all the little spaces within the spine can get loaded up to a very unnatural position. Think about it. How unnatural is it to like act, what do they call it, like a teapot or something like that? You bend to the side and you're like reaching for something. That never happens. You bend forward typically. You bend with the knees. You bend as you're squatting down. You don't typically load your body up with weight and tilt yourself to one side. Very, very unnatural, very unsafe. especially if you're using a lot of weight. And for the most part, people are bending perfectly unilateral. It just means perfectly to the side or laterally. They're bending with a little bit of a lean forward. So now keep in mind the most dangerous position for your back is rotating to one side and bending over. That puts your spine at the greatest risk for injury, and this exercise almost perfectly mimics that. So I can't recommend it. There's no need for it. You can do a seated boat pose or a seated V pose, and you can do oblique twist holding onto a medicine ball. Or you can stand up, or you can kneel down, and you can do band chops or cable chops or medicine ball chops. There's so many great exercises like that. You can do dumbbell axe chops. Again, start with planking, start with boats, start with just full body exercises that's going to engage your core anyway, and that's how you're truly going to work your abs. And then you can do the icing on the cake. The icing on the cake are all the other like one leg up ab crunches and those types of things. So you can work your abs. I'm not saying that. I know people love to work their abs. Nothing wrong with that. You absolutely can. However, we want you to do it in a natural way, which means, lying on your back, doing a full sit-up, all that. That's not natural. Lying in a machine and making the machine do the work, not natural. This bending to one side, not natural. Having another human being just whip your legs down, not natural. So what I want to do is I want to keep you safe. Mainly, you probably heard me talk about, I want to keep your lower back safe. I want to keep your spine safe. Because when you get a back injury, it could take months or potentially even longer to get back into exercise. And I've just seen that throw off people's routines, throw off their mood, throw off their body transformation, throw off so many different things. And I don't want that for you. So hopefully today's podcast helped with that. And of course, if there's any questions or if you have a question on an ab exercise that you like to do, just go to stevencabral.com/Ask Cabral, and I'll be happy to answer that question for you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. As always, please do feel free to share this show with anyone you believe it could help. Before you go, I wanted to share a personal story with you. The real reason I began to get well finally is because I figured out what was wrong with me. And that might seem pretty obvious, but I went from doctor to doctor for over 2 years before discovering at-home functional medicine lab testing. These are the labs that enabled me to finally figure out what was wrong with my hormones, blood sugar, electrolytes, and gut health. And once I knew what was wrong, I could then follow a proven plan in order to rebalance my body from the inside out. This is why I believe so strongly in functional medicine lab testing and why I've made it my mission to share these labs with the world. Now at equa.life, you can order an at-home lab test or lab bundle for you and your family and be able to complete it within the week. Plus, the EquaLife difference is that you're not left to try to read and figure out these labs on your own. We explain what your lab numbers mean, what they mean in the much bigger picture, and then how to go about rebalancing your body in order to heal. To see our full selection of lab tests or to set up a free lab selection call to find out what labs may be best for you, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. And do remember, we ship these all over the world. To find out more and to set up your free lab selection call, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. That's EQUI.LIFE/labs.